Welcome to Lou's CIS Demos. Today we're going to be using Oracle's VirtualBox to install the Windows 10. I'm going to be using the Windows 10 trial key. So once you open up VirtualBox, you essentially have here a couple different settings. You got new, settings, start. So we're going to go click on new. And here we're going to give it a name. And if we use the name of the OS, you can see here how it changed from Microsoft to Windows 10 64. And then by default there's the location that it's going to choose, and then we can hit next. Here we can allocate the memory, so you can see I have 16 gigs of RAM in my machine, so I can turn around and move this up or type it in there, scroll, type the number in there, just click away. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Then you can hit next. Here, if we have additional hard drive, we're going to, if we had a VM that someone's given us, we would use existing. If we're making it from scratch, then we're going to use the default settings. And then the hard drive type. Basically, this is a file system that the virtual system is going to use to install Windows in. So you have the default, which is the VDI, which is the VirtualBox image. You can use the virtual disk image, the VHD, or you can use the virtual machine disk. If you're not planning to export this to anywhere, then go with the default. If you're planning to export it into something else, then choose that. And then here we have our storage settings. We can go dynamic or fixed. Fixed will take instantly the space. So if you set it for 20 gigs, it's going to take 20 gigs, or 60 gigs. It's going to take that space immediately from your machine. Dynamic will grow as you put stuff in there. It'll grow, won't necessarily shrink, but it'll grow. The other advantage is fixed is slightly faster. Dynamic is you're not taking up the full space. So that's kind of a nice setting. I like to use dynamic myself. And then here gives you the default. Because I'm using dynamic, I can give a little bit more space to it. Because unless I'm filling it, it's never going to use it. So we're going to hit create. And we essentially got the environment set up. So I want to kind of go into the settings here and show you a couple things. So here we go in the system. So by default it takes one CPU core. So if you have more than one core, you can add that up in there to give you more performance. The next thing, and the next tab is the networking tab. So by default you get one network card. It's enabled, it's set up for NAT. If you're using a laptop, you're using wireless, NAT would be a best bet. You can also use bridge. So if you're using a wired network, you can use bridge. So that would essentially share the same outside IP address. So if you're, like an example, if you're at home, you have a 192.168.1. something address, it'll use the same thing. Where now, if you're on another machine, you can connect to this virtual through a network if you use the bridge. I'm currently connected wireless, so I'm going to go with the NAT settings. And then from here we go to storage. You want to click on the little CD-ROM, and then we're going to use an ISO. So an ISO is basically a zip image of a CD. So I'm going to choose my drive. Here's my Windows 10. I'm going to hit OK. Now at this point I can hit start. And then let's make this full screen. And then here we're going essentially through any window install. So we have the initial boot up sequence where it's booting up. Now it's prompting us our language. So I'm going to go with the default settings. And then here it's going to ask us to install. And then if we were trying to do a repair, we would put the ISO back in and do the repair. This would be after you had the Windows installed and you were having some problems, you would choose the repair. But since we're installing from scratch, we're going to go with install now. So now the next thing, Windows is getting ready to set up. Then we're going to hit the licensing agreement. So you should read it at least once in your life. So you would just scroll down, click yes, I agree to the licensing term, hit next. And then we're going to go with custom install. So by default here you can see here's the drive I have set up. You can choose to change it if you want. You don't have to. I'm just going to go with the default settings and we're going to hit next. And then essentially you can see here's the 5 steps it's going to go through. It's going to copy the Windows files. It's getting the installation files. It's going to install the features, set up, and finish. So I'm going to pause this at this point because it would be no sense of sitting here waiting for this to finish running. And I'll come right. Alright, so now the machine had rebooted and now it's coming up for the first time. You can see where it says getting ready. Now here you can see where it says press any key to boot from CD. We don't want to press any key, we want to let it go past. So what that means is so the Windows 10, when the machine boots up, if the machine's set to boot off a CD first, it's going to boot off the CD, and then it's going to see the CD's booted, but the CD's going to see that there's an OS install, so that's why it's going to ask you that real quick. And then we're now up to the setup page. So we can choose customize or express setup. So unless you're planning to do some major tailoring, go customize. Always, this is if your first time in doing an install by yourself, go with the express settings. Now that the machine booted up, we have to choose the account that we're going to log into, so we can either join into an Azure Active Directory or just a local. So if you're just installing this to practice, go with the bottom choice. And then you're going to hit next. And then it's going to ask you to create an account. So I'm just going to call it user A. Give it a password. So then you can give it a hint. And hit next. So now it's going to ask you if you want to use Cortana. If you don't really have a microphone and all that stuff set up, I would say not now. If you're using a virtual, it's not like it's going to be able to access your microphone, so I would say not now. But you can always change it later. So if you do have it set up where you can pass a microphone to it, then by all means. Then you can see here's the initial setup for the user profile. Crane saying, hi, we're happy you're here. And now it's getting your things ready, so don't turn the machine off. Yes, you don't want to turn your VMs or your machine off when it's in the middle of finishing its configuration files, unless you really had to. I would not recommend it strongly. So one of the difference between using the trial and versus a store-bought copy is it's going to ask you to put in a CD key. Since we're using the trial, it's not going to ask us for a key. We can just, keep going for 90 days. Or I think it's 90 or 60 days. The trial is. It depends on which version of the OS you have. You would be able to run it. So we should be at almost at the finishing stage, I think. All right. So now we have Windows 10 installed. So one of the first things I like to do is go up to Device and go to Insert, Guest Added. What it's going to do is going to help you with your mouse. So it's going to mount a CD inside here. So we go to the Windows Explorer, or it might even just auto pop up in a moment or two. I'm just getting impatient, I guess. You click on this PC, you can see here's a new CD. We're going to just double click on it, and then we're just going to click on add-ons, and then here you can see the UNC popped up saying, are we sure we want to do this? We're going to say yes, and then we're just going to follow the default settings. Pretty easy to go. So this will allow us to free the mouse easier, interact. It will also supply additional driver support for the Windows machine, so it knows that it's working in a environment. So like here's an example, installing a network or some driver I wasn't paying attention closely. And then you can choose to hit next and it'll restart, or you can just say I'll reboot later, click finish, and we can, and also the additives are going to help fix the display, so it'll take up more space on your system. So that is one nice advantage about using the virtual. You can have the screen a little bit larger. You can do full screen. Essentially helps with the graphics side of the desktop interface. So then we just hit enter. There's my user, made it user A, just typing in the password. And then voila, we are connected to a Windows 10 machine. And because of the drivers, it finished loading up, detecting the driver, detected that the display is a little bit larger, so now it gave us full size screen. Alright, pretty easy to set up Windows 10, or at least get the installation part going. Alright, catch you later.